Hello and welcome to the third episode of EK Expo CES 2024. The last 2 days were super fun and educational. We learned a lot about cutting-edge liquid cooling solutions for PCs and HPC systems, and even unveiled a couple of our new EK products. You can find the link to the previous episodes in the description below. As for today's episode, we're all about the builds.
Okay, it's day 3 now. Today, it's all about the builds. We've shown you all the products we've got. Let's see them in some units. Joe, what have we got here?
So here we have the Fluid Gaming Titan, which is a build in the Asus Republic of Gamers Hyperion chassis with a Reflection 2 distribution plate, a Vector 2 active backplate on a 4090, and an LGA 1700 Velocity 2 on a 14900K. So this is a really high spec system. It's using the beautiful Impulse DRGB fans for maximum RGB, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's a real chunky boy. I like it. What about this one though, Joe?
So here we have a concept system, which is the spiritual replacement to the Conqueror. It's now in the O11D Evo XL by Lian Li, which means there's space for a lot more cooling. It's of course upgraded with the Reflection 2 O11D XL Evo distribution plate, and true to the original system, it uses all quantum components on the inside. So it's upgraded from 2 P360s to 2 P420s, making it much quieter and much cooler than the original.
So that's the 2 new offerings from EK Fluid Gaming. They're brilliant builds, they're really nice. They come to your house, you just fill them up and they're good to go. They're available from ekfluidgaming.com right now. And now we're going to go over to see some modded builds by our guest modders over here.
But first, we have a brand new product for you that was launched today. The amazing Nucleus AIO Direct Die.
So over here we have the latest EK Nucleus products. First and foremost is the very first in the world direct die AIO. This model is specific for LGA 1700. It always has a 360mm radiator and some very distinct changes to the cold plate. First of all, it's nickel plated to withstand liquid metal so that it won't impact the integrity of the copper. And it's also much thicker. On the inside, it's still skived in exactly the same way as a conventional nucleus, and the actual base thickness is increased so you have some extra mass to spread the heat when the heat spreader is removed. In principle, removing the heat spreader allows substantial gains, making this one of the biggest performance improvements you can make to CPU temp out of the box with a single solution. It's supplied with everything you need to mount it. So there's a custom reinforced backplate, the appropriate standoffs, reinforced front mounting plate, so nothing flexes, and of course a die guard. All of these parts were made in collaboration with De Bauer. They all feature his logo and use his intellectual property, which was licensed to us for the purpose of these products. It's also supplied with Thermal Grizzly conductor knot paste, as well as 2 alternative covers for the pump top. One has a skull logo with diamond turned finish on black, and the other is a plain black one, just in case you don't like the skull. But it's a really cool thing to set off the product and let everyone know that this is not a toy. This is a really extreme product, and CPU is delivered under there, so this will gain amazing temps. Next up, we see the direct die AIO completely assembled. That's how it will look installed on a motherboard, and of course, it's supplied with DRGB FPT fans, so overall, a great package. At the end, we have a preview of some new exchangeable parts that will become available for Nucleus. So you can see there is an extra black cover. This will be released as an accessory part. So if you have the base model, if you have a dark nucleus, or if you have a Lux nucleus, you can upgrade it, add the diamond turned edge, and a nice black bezel with much more subtle lighting implementation. Also, to allow everyone freedom to make whatever they want under AAO, we're also going to release a 3D print kit. It will comprise of a base, which is essentially a light guide. So the base will have the magnets pressed into it and the screw holes prepared that allow it to fit in exactly the same way the original one does. And then you can use the parts from your original cover, so you can take the ring from the outside with the badge, you can take the PCB out with the LED for the badge. Also, if you can print and source the magnets, you don't actually need to buy any of it, and we'll just make all the 3D files available. So expect to see them hosted on the product page for that.
Okay, now we're over here with the guest builds. This one's by Stuart Tonks, or GGF. It's a really nice build. You'll have already seen it from yesterday's footage. Attila went through that in depth. I'm sure you'll see it. If you haven't seen it already, make sure you go over it and make sure you do watch it, because it's a really nice build. It's white and orange. It's my favorite colors. Stuart knows how to, rub me the right way. Joe, what have you got over there?
And I'm joined here by Jorge's exemplary blue and silver build. So why don't we go and take a look at the build process, what parts we used inside, and how we got to this end result. So as we can see, this is already shaping up to be a very classic PC mod with extensive use of color, of sleeving, and of coolant to accent things. Not relying on DRGB, instead opting for a satin titanium combination of the EK quantum magnitude, a very traditional looking component, alongside a FLT240 kinetic, from which the RGB has been removed. Jorge wanted the colors of the coolant, the colors of the cables, everything to stand out. And it's a beautiful monochrome color palette. Seen here is a Liquid House Cube Tube, which is a very novel innovation from within the community. Of course, all accented by satin titanium torque fittings without colorings for simplicity, and a distinct combination of both plexi and satin titanium metal tubes. The coolant used is EK Cryofuel Azure Blue, which brings continuous blue stripe through the left half of the build. It's concealed inside the CPU block and accented again at the front. Other than a coordinated lighting accent on the I/O of the motherboard and the DRGB incorporated into the memory modules, everything is monochromatic and really makes everything pop.
I think you can agree that both of them systems are fantastic, and we're super happy to have them both in our suite. Thank you very much for them, guys. Now, we've got another system to show you right here. What have we got here, Joe?
So now we have the EK Quantum Torsion build from CompuTex. It was originally in a black prototype version of the case, and now it's been transferred to the final silver retail version of the case, and these will be shipping in January. So get ready for those, and what an absolute magnificent beast of a system. It's still just as awesome as when we made it.
Yeah, it's definitely something to try to lift up. I know that much. Lifting this onto a table isn't easy, but it's, well, completely full. I think there's a lot of information about the torsion already online. There's a good bunch of videos, so make sure you check them out. And we've got one more thing to show him. For the last few days, we've been teasing you about one final build. It's rather sexy. It's this. Look at that in all of its glory. Joe, what is it?
So this is the culmination of all of our work for CES 2024. Hundreds of hours went into this, 4 of the brand new products. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for being in the suite. We hope to see you soon, and let's close out with the last installment on this build. Welcome back. Right now, we're going to be taking a close look at the latest QuantumX build that was made for CES 2024. Since we're unveiling so many new products and there was lots of exciting things we were working on, most of them were incorporated into this build. So we have a lot of new things to get through. And what it all started with was the case itself. So it was inspired by a piece of marketing material where we showed all of the EK components rendered with no case and no hardware. So the radiators, the fans, and everything stood suspended from a distribution plate. And that is what we tried to attempt to recreate with a real physical build. So the case was designed specifically to not be a case. Very systematically, every part was hidden, concealed, and disguised as much as possible. They were all thinned down and made incredibly light. So what we have in the end is a skeleton of a case, which from the front angles is completely obscured by all of the hardware. The distro plate on the front was made specifically for this build. It was considered we might use a standard distribution plate, but we decided if we made a new one, we could spread things out and extend the illusion of things levitating even more. So there's a nice big gap under the GPU from the radiator and again above the motherboard. So you really have the illusion that the motherboard and the GPU sits floating in the middle of these components. The distribution plate is our first ever dual loop distribution plate. So the CPU is cooled by the top Surface P420 and the GPU is cooled by two Surface P420s, one on the bottom of the case and one on the back side. Also adorning the prototype distribution plate are two samples of our latest convection DRGB D5 cover. And these have a vivid ring of LEDs around the pump, and very conveniently the cover is located with magnets, so you can remove it, access the cabling, adjust the pump speed if you have a vario motor, and that was essential for this build and really helped keep the wiring clean. The fans being used are Loop FPT 140 DRGB fans, and this is actually the first time I think I've put together a full DRGB build in the history of EK, and maybe ever. So all of the fans are RGB, all of the blocks, all the distro plate, and linking all of that together in a case that shouldn't exist was probably the biggest challenge of the entire build. So in order to keep cables to a minimum, we wanted that there was only a single wire, a single signal wire leaving the motherboard, and then a wiring loom for all of the 12 volt and 5 volt devices was created directly from the power supply. So there are no cables reaching to every header around the edge of the motherboard, but just one hidden neatly between the EPS connectors at the top. They run past every fan in sequence, all 9 of them, and also have a spur for the convection covers and the front distribution plate. Next, in the exciting world of EK prototypes, we have the Velocity 2 Edge block. This is the first time the Edge was ever used in a build, and we have the black version here for LGA 1700. That also features its own addressable RGB, and it's wired directly to the motherboard, so it's in its own zone. All of the wires are kind of hidden inside the heatsinks of the motherboard, so everything stayed really clean. So that Velocity 2 Edge block is cooling an i9 13900K, which is in a Asus Republic of Gamers Maximus Z790 Hero. The memory we're using in this build is from Team Group. It's T-Force RGB, and we have 4 16GB sticks for a total of 64 GB of system memory at 6000 MHz. The GPU is a Power Color Red Devil equipped with the Quantum Red Devil block. So very much like a Liquid Devil, We actually used some of the wiring that we had from a Liquid Devil GPU to adapt it that the GPU LED is connected directly to the PCB under the backplate, so the GPU is controlled by its original lighting software as if it were a Liquid Devil, and in that way we also didn't need to trail any cables across to the GPU block. Powering all of that hardware is a Silverstone Strider 1300 watt titanium power supply that's mounted immediately behind the motherboard. That allowed us to build custom cables that wrap very tightly to the motherboard and further consolidate the visual that the entire motherboard assembly is floating. So by keeping them tight, they don't visually connect to anything else on the case, and it all just appears to be suspended and working, illuminated, and cooling passing to it. The cables for this build are all handmade with MDPCX supplies. They were made specifically to fit in these exact placements, so the orientation of the crimps, the length of each individual wire, and the assembly of each piece was specific to this build. So they're all trained, they all stay in place and hold that visual. The colors used for the cables were intended to be evocative of a sunset, so they fade through from yellow, orange, pink, purple, and finally into blue and carbon. They all emanate from the center of the build, so closest to the CPU is yellow, and they fade away from there. And we also set all of the lighting effects of the build to follow that scheme to be representative of the sunset. So lower in the case, it's orange or warmer colors, and higher in the case, we have blue tones and much cooler colors. The choice of coolant also reflects that decision. The lower loop for the GPU uses solid fire orange coolant, and the upper loop uses cryofuel solid electric purple coolant. And then lastly, of course, most importantly, the loop itself. It's constructed very much like every other front-mounted distribution plate Matrix 7 loop, with a few little distinctions. So to clean up the front end and to reduce the number of ports, we actually made the entire graphics card block assembly movable in the case. So you don't need 3 sets of ports at the front, and you also don't need to use offset fittings for the GPU. Instead, it just slides up and down in increments of 7mm, and in that way, there's just 2 holes in the distro and 2 tubes passing along, and it always works out exactly the same. The CPU is connected in a very similar way with 2 parallel tubes, except in this instance, an offset fitting was necessary because we're not using a monoblock, we're using a CPU block, so the exact position of the CPU is dependent on the specific motherboard. And in this case, we needed an offset of 7mm. So the offset fittings are placed on the distribution plate, and we just have straight extender fittings on the CPU block. The radiators have very little tubing to the build actually, and for the first time we used the ports in the very end of the radiators. We typically avoid doing that with standard distribution plates for cases because it prevents the use of S radiators. Here, since we made everything specific for this, we're using P radiators, which do have the ports in the end, and the top and bottom radiator just push directly inside. The side radiator utilizes one 90-degree fitting and one double rotary offset 28mm and 2 very short tubes to connect it. So in total, this build has 6 tubes. They are our matte black brass tubing in 14mm size. And as if we didn't have enough prototypes already in this build between the case, the CPU block, its distribution plate, the pump covers, we also have a brand new finish of fittings. So these are genuine rose gold plated torque fittings, and they continue the theme, and they also reflect a very warm light and a quite unique tone that a nickel fitting or a satin fitting wouldn't. And they really, when the lighting is turned on, clean up the build and bring everything together so that it makes sense. So thank you very much for checking this out. It was a privilege to have it displayed at CES and also to use so many new products. Huge thanks to everyone at EKWB that allowed it to happen in time. This was a crazy project to push through in December right before Christmas, but it's there and it looks absolutely immaculate. So thank you very much to all the hardware vendors who supported this project, especially Team Group for the memory and Silverstone for making a power supply that was such a pleasure to sleeve. It wouldn't be finished on time if it wasn't so easy. If you want to take a look at behind the scenes of every element of this project, from the initial idea of the case through to getting all of the parts, all of the design, and eventually the assembly and even some use of the build where we go through thermals and check it out, then come to our YouTube channel again for the QuantumX shows. For now, thank you very much for joining.
Wow, what an amazing and impossible build! Joe has done it again. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for the full QuantumX show. And now, to wrap up our CES24 Expo videos. We had a ton of fun, met some truly fantastic people, had an amazing modding guests, showcased numerous awesome builds, and dove deep into EK's future-proof liquid cooling products. Feel free to share your thoughts and questions in the comment section. Your opinion matters to us. And don't forget to like, share, and press that subscribe button if you enjoy our shows and want to see more from us. See you for the next EK Expo event, or maybe even sooner. Until then, EK will continue to make the tech world even cooler. Bye!